think we all take it quite personally when somebody, tells us that it's their decision, that they're deciding not to drink. It's almost like I think they're saying no to the social interaction rather than saying no to the drink.
Hi there, welcome to Finding Space with Alex Tyson, the show that celebrates the everyday legends who put in the hard work to become who they want to be and live the life they want to live. For people who understand that when we practice compassion and find wisdom within ourselves, we find success and happiness. Join me in hearing amazing stories from everyday individuals who have found incredible personal and professional growth through varied and, at times, wild methods of self-improvement and self-responsibility, and through their unique perspectives and work, have gone on to better the lives of those around them. From nurturing health to growing your wealth, or enjoying the present to crafting your future, no aspect of life is off topic. This episode is brought to you by Found Space. We are now open in Australia and New Zealand. Ready to make a change? Looking for infrared sauna? Make your home a place of wellness to live a longer and healthier life. Head to foundspace.com.au or foundspace.co.nz to learn more. Andy Miller, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It is an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Looking forward to chatting.
So you're in Thailand right now. How long have you been there? And I'm curious to hear about what led you there.
I've been in Thailand, in Bangkok, since January this year. And the thing that led me over here was my wife, my partner, being posted for her work with the Australian government. But it was also a really interesting opportunity for Heaps Normal as a business. We've been distributing through Southeast Asia for almost a year now, and so it was a really great opportunity for us to see what else we can do in the region.
Yeah, so you're kind of going over there with a bit of business purpose to kind of get some energy into the region.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's it was one of those things where we just needed to make it work because we had to make the decision as a family to move. But I think it's been a really positive thing.
Yeah, cool. And where were you residing before that?
In Canberra. So we started the business in Canberra, but several of our team and two of the founders, Benny and Pete, are Sydney-based, and so for us, we're really proud of our Canberra roots. But this is Heaps Normal's become for us, from our perspective, it's an independent Australian company.
I love that.
Sort of being from a particular place.
Yeah, nice. And so you've gone from absolutely freezing at this time of year to being pretty nice and warm at this time of year.
Yeah, freezing over here at the moment is dropping below 30 degrees and below 80% humidity. So no such thing in Bangkok.
And so what brewing experience did you have when Heaps Normal kind of cooked up? I mean, we'll talk a bit more about how it all kind of took off and how you got into that space. But I mean, it's not like you just decide, oh, there's a market here, let's just set up a brewery, right? So what kind of experience did you have leading into that space?
I worked for a couple of different craft brewers in Australia and for several alcohol brands in my career. I don't have technical brewing experience. I'm not a brewer myself, but that was my experience in the brewing industry, more from a marketing point of view, marketing and brand strategy. But it gave me a really, interesting kind of keen sense on what it took to create a successful beer company. And I met some really interesting people along the way, like Ben Holdstock, who is our he's not our head brewer per se, but he's got more than 15 years of brewing experience, and he's the brewer in our founding team.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. You were kind of more the marketing and the message kind of guy, right?
Yeah, that's right. And Pete, being the more visual brand guy.
And so how did it come together for Heaps Normal? Like, how did you guys kind of stumble upon each other and think, oh, there's something here?
So Pete came up with this crazy idea to do a non-alcoholic beer, and it was something he was really excited about. I think, because of his history with alcohol in his family, and he called me up, and I think he'd sort of spoken to a couple of other people that maybe weren't so enthusiastic about the idea, and he called me up, and I immediately just thought it sounded like a really exciting challenge, and a totally new space as well from that not many people were looking at the time, and so I immediately then called Ben and said, hey, would you be able to help us, develop a recipe for a non-alcoholic beer? And again, sort of was half expecting Ben to sort of laugh me off the phone or sort of politely decline, but he was really up for it, and he saw it really as a challenge because it's really difficult to create a beer that carries all of the flavors you'd expect without the alcohol. And while I think a lot of brewers did look at the challenge and go, well, what's the point of brewing beer without alcohol? Benny saw that as a really interesting challenge to be solved from a brewing perspective.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it the nature of fermentation that alcohol can be created?
Yeah, it is. And our beer undergoes that same process of fermentation, but Benny, over the course of 6 months, sort of reworked a lot of different steps in that traditional brewing process to create a process with, without getting too technical, a lot less sugar in the recipe to begin with that could be potentially fermented into alcohol. And on top of that, we use a yeast, which is obviously that's the organism that turns the sugar into alcohol. And we use a yeast that is a non-traditional variety, which it selectively chooses which sugars it turns into alcohol. So it undergoes a fermentation, so we get those nice fermented flavors in our product, but it only ever ferments to around 0.5% alcohol, and usually then the finished product is slightly under that. So it's only a very, very trace amount of alcohol, which you cannot make you intoxicated, and doesn't affect most people at all.
It's kind of like drinking kombucha or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's the same as drinking kombucha, all kombucha, and in fact, a lot of other foods have a naturally occurring amount of alcohol that's sometimes even more than what we're talking about in our beer.
Yeah, I mean, it's my understanding that like foods can even create alcohol when they're fermenting in our gut.
Yeah, that's right. And like an overripe banana, for example, like can also have that sort of alcohol, or more store-bought fruit juice that sits in your fridge for a couple of days can also kind of create some alcohol. So yeah,
that's
everywhere.
Fascinating, man. So is it like, and you can just tell me to like, Alex, can't go there, but is it like a trade secret to what you were talking about there as to the yeast only being selective with the sugars that it works on? Or is the trade secret more around how you generate the beautiful beer flavors that you do through the process, but everyone knows how to do it without generating alcohol? Like, is it a bit of both? Or?
Look, it's a bit of both. I mean, we were the first brewery in Australia to commercialize the yeast variety that we're using, but having said that, it is commercially available. So that's not necessarily a major trade secret. I think it's definitely more in the process and the recipe that we've developed in-house for developing our product. And yeah, certainly I think the fact that there are so many different, non-alcoholic beers out there that all taste quite different. Many of them using the same yeast that we're using is a credit to, the fact that, the process and the recipe has quite a profound impact on the end product.
Yeah, really interesting. And this kind of comes at a time where in popular culture, like non-alcoholic drinks are really becoming more and more known. Like even just earlier in the week, I was out for dinner and it was my fiance and I's 9-year anniversary. And so we're out for dinner and like, having a good time. Thanks, man. And there was some non-alcoholic drinks on the menu, which normally I'm not interested in. Like I'll just have some water or kombucha or something. But I saw a non-alcoholic drink and I was like, oh, okay, I'll give it a go. So I ordered a non-alcoholic G&T, which when I got it and sipped it, it tasted exactly like a G&T. And it really, it made me laugh because I was like, I actually never liked G&Ts in the first place, but it was the novelty. It was the novelty of it being non-alcoholic, which I thought was quite cool. And these things are just becoming more and more known. And overseas in Europe, like they're quite big and they're really pushing the marketing for non-alcoholic beer. And I see that kind of filtering into Australia. But you guys are kind of ahead of the curve in that sense. But it sounds like it just kind of happened organically. You weren't seeing an opportunity in the market other than you thought it'd be cool to try it out, right?
Yeah, we were really scratching our own itch when it came to it. We all had a different reason for wanting to cut back our drinking. Pete's sort of since gone, totally sober. He's off the booze completely. Benny and I still really enjoy, a nice glass of wine every now and again, a few kind of different beers. When we go out, really enjoy kind of exploring those different flavors. We started it for our own because, there wasn't anything else out there that appealed to us as beer drinkers. And so it was a happy accident that we discovered that there were a lot more people like us out there who didn't necessarily identify as sober, but who were facing that same challenge for themselves around, wanting to cut back in some way, shape or form. And for some reason that was meaningful to them, but just didn't want to be told how much they should or shouldn't be drinking. We just wanted to create a great tasting product that tasted like a beer and was, a real beer without needing to kind of preach in the process.
Yeah. How do you balance that line? Because it's such a drinking out. And I know this from my own personal experiences. I went through changing my routines and I'm sure many people can relate. Like you have that moment where you go out with your mates and you're like, I'm not having a drink tonight. And they're like, whoa, like people get triggered and like, it's this weird conversation. And it's like this separation of like, now I'm here and you're there. And it's like this weird thing. And you guys are like smack bang in the middle of that. How do you kind of navigate that conversation with people who are choosing to purchase your beer and you guys obviously being for that, like, hey, like you don't have to go sober, but it's like a good thing. It's like, how do you kind of balance that line well?
Yeah, it's a funny one. I think we all have at some point, and probably some of us still do, like take it quite personally when somebody tells us that it's their decision, that they're deciding not to drink. It's almost like I think they're saying no to the social interaction rather than saying no to the drink, and so I think that's maybe why at least I have sort of felt that way in the past. But on the flip side, I've also been on the other end of the conversation where you just don't want to answer that question, why aren't you drinking 20 times in a night just becomes exhausting. So, we wanted to create a product that, looked good in the hand, tasted, you didn't have to convince yourself that you were drinking a beer because it just tasted like a regular beer. that for us was a big part of it. Like we're not screaming zero alcohol on the can, and we don't spend a lot of time and energy as a business talking about talking about the benefits of non-alcoholic beer or the kind of doom and gloom of issues associated with excessive alcohol consumption. What we try to focus on as a brand, and I think that filters through to the conversations that we have, certainly in social environments, and hopefully that other people in our community are having as well, is what's the kind of stuff that's like that excites you, that you love, that you want to spend all of your time on, that is so much more important to you than writing yourself off. Because for us, it's not about drinking or not drinking. It's just about the choice that you're making to prioritize, something over something else. And if you're reflecting on what's important to you, and as we put it, for Heaps Normal, like the stuff that's too good to be wasted, then if you're reflecting on whatever that is for you, then you're going to come up with something that works, for you, and that's sort of all we can ask, really.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it got me to a really interesting place, thinking about all the Sunday mornings that can be written off because we're making a choice that that doesn't suit us ultimately. It doesn't kind of fit in with ultimately where we want to be as a person. And I like that too, around that conversation can become really exhausting. And I actually think, and you can probably talk more to this than I can, but I actually think it opens up a more interesting conversation. Yes, about Heaps Normal, like, yeah, I'm drinking this thing, I'm an alcoholic and whatever. But to me, that like it opens up a more deep conversation, because to what you were saying there, like it allows us to not be written off the next day. And so why is that? We don't want to be written off because there's probably something greater, bigger, more important that we're working on as an individual or as a community that we want to be able to put our energy into and not have it wasted because we had too many wines the night before, or we drank a 6-pack and now we feel like shit, So I think there's something really interesting there in it kind of opening that space for people. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, for sure. Sort of that's what motivates us. Whether it's, working on your business or working on your music, spending more time with your family, getting up early for a surf, like whatever it is, there's probably, if we all think about it, I think we've all got something that is probably higher on the list than vegging on the couch feeling like shit ordering Uber Eats, like it's on a Sunday morning. Like that's probably not, like, if you really think about it, the stuff that's at the top of your list.
100%, man. I hear you're a surfer. Is there good surf in Thailand?
No, there can be, but it's very unpredictable and it's a long way from Bangkok. And I was quite disappointed. I got myself a new board before I came over, and I was all pumped to kept it in the family and got a Smith Shapes from Geordie, who's our fourth co-founder. It's a cosmic fish, so it's really fun. And
how long?
5'10".
Nice.
So I'm 6'1". So
that's a short.
It's short for me, and but it's still meaty enough for someone of my quite amateur surfing ability to still get heaps of waves, which is important.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Actually, I'm in inches. I think I'm like 5'9", and I just went down to a 6-foot fish. Actually, nice, meaty. I can get on a wave, but there's still a bit of room for me to get a bit sharper. Definitely.
I overestimated my ability with board choices for most of my surfing life. So it's good to finally have a board that just lets you get out there and have a bit of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And so hold on, you were in Canberra. Where were you surfing? You must have had to do some trips to the coast, right?
Yeah, I would. Whenever I was driving to Sydney to meet with Benny and Pete all the time, and and also with customers early on in the business as well. So anytime I would be driving to Sydney, I'd always throw my board in the back of the car and hope that I got a gap in between meetings and shoot out for a quick surf at Maroubra or up to the northern beaches where Pete normally likes to surf.
Nice. There's some good surf around there. I haven't surfed there personally, but I've been there before I surfed and recognized there was some good spots around there.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, nice. So yeah, it's interesting. I think coming back to that question, so like how do you kind of not get in people's faces besides obviously the branding, but how do you get your message out there and help people understand it's non-alcoholic without putting the message through, hey, you should not be drinking alcohol? Like, how do you kind of toe that line?
I think, like I was saying, I think we just try to focus on the stuff that has nothing to do with alcohol. Really, it's the stuff that is made better by having a beer and socializing. Like, but I guess what we arrived at is that looking at our own drinking behavior, we tried to ask ourselves what that bigger question was around, like why do we drink? Like, what is it? And the some of the reasons that we came up with for ourselves came back to that, that social connection, that connection with people, being out, experiencing, like having shared experiences together that are kind of inspiring and enjoyable, like whether it's live music or going to a footy match, or hanging out at the beach, having a picnic with a bunch of mates or whatever it is. And so where was I going with that? If you're asking yourself that question, why are you drinking? Like, I think that's what I was going to say. I think for us, like we sort of felt like we'd got to this point, certainly, Benny, Pete and I, when we were discussing starting Heaps Normal, we sort of noticed that meeting up for a beer had become a pastime in itself. And that was a disconnect. I think that was a sign for us personally that, drinking isn't, and I think we see that in some of the stories that we tell each other as well, like in our social groups, like, what did you do last night? Auntie Donna have a fun skit, I think, that talks to exactly this. It's great. I just saw it recently.
What's the skit?
I think one of them, it's a few mates, and one of them says, "Oh, what did you get up to last night?" And then they, in a melodic kind of musical kind of way, like they tend to do, the friend sort of starts talking about, well, first I had a six pack, then I had a cocktail, then I had a this, and then they're like, yeah, but what did you do? And then like they keep going, well, then I had a bottle of tequila, and then I had a glass of wine, and then and it was a kind of interesting reminder of that original thought that we had in talking about starting Heaps Normal, where, because we were asking ourselves that question, like, what's the point? What's the point of non-alcoholic beer? Why do we drink? Like, some of these big questions. And we realized in the course of that conversation that it can very easily, and had for us, become a habit. You meet up for a beer after work, you meet up on a Saturday to have a beer with mates, and you're getting that social interaction inherently, I think, but it becomes more about the beer than it does about what you're actually doing or who you're spending the time with, and also I think about having meaningful conversations rather than just sort of small talk with strangers around the front bar. It feels less exciting. I think that the latter feels less exciting to me. So I've probably gone off on a massive tangent again.
No. I know exactly what you mean. So in some ways it's kind of analogous. I think it's analogous to even like having a coffee, or even going shopping. It's the same thing that we're kind of after there,
That's it.
Yeah, it's that connection. It could be with others. It could be just with yourself. Like, the amount of times I've heard, as you say, the stories around, I love my I don't actually have to drink coffee. I can go without it, but it's that ritual. It's that morning thing, and you're like, oh, there might be a story there, but there might not be. But the fact is that it's that connection. Like, you have that time, you have your coffee, it's that time with yourself before, everything else happens in the world. And it can be a similar thing with shopping. I guess it can be a similar thing with gambling even, these other things which typically could be around connection, but end up just being about the thing and not being about what we originally set out to do.
Totally. And I think for that reason, that's why we came to the conclusion for ourselves, and we're open to the fact that not everyone comes to the same conclusion, but we realized that, well, it's not. It helped us answer that question of like, well, what's the point? Because for us, the point was not that there was alcohol in the beer. The point was that we were setting that time aside to go to hang out with friends, to have a conversation, to have that, to make that connection with someone that we cared about, or we were making that time to go out and do something for ourselves, like see a gig or go to a footy match. And it wasn't the fact that there was alcohol in the beer that really had much to do with that. And certainly beyond a few beers, the alcohol, I think there's there's diminishing returns on the amount of on beers above and beyond that sort of amount. But so and so if you're drinking beer for the taste, or you're drinking beer because you want to meet up with mates, or you're drinking beer for these other reasons, like that you want to get more out of it than what the alcohol gives you, then they're the reasons. I think that why non-alcoholic beer for us is has a reason to exist. It's not a judgment. It's not a replacement. It's just an option.
Yeah, I really like that angle. It's really nice. It makes me think of also, we talk about that separation, that social separation. It's no different to when you're eating or choosing to not eat something, choosing to not eat meat, and you go out with your friends and, I'm just going to have that. And they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, where do you get your protein from, And I can see this kind of link between Heaps Normal and then some of the really nice, like high quality vegan meats. It's like, it's not because that person who's choosing not to eat animals feels like they want to eat a steak because they need to eat the steak, like from a physiological perspective. It's just because it gives them an option to feel like they can have something similar to what their friends are having. And I kind of like that angle on it, because it kind of takes the edge off what can be another awkward conversation when you start to eat differently from, if you go vegan or if you go vegetarian and you want to have something like that. I really kind of like that.
Yeah, 100%. And I've had similar conversations with my really good friend, childhood friend, and founder of Fable Food Co., who do plant-based meat alternatives. And they've got a similar take when it comes to vegetarian options or plant-based options as we do when it comes to non-alcoholic beers. They're not specifically out there, targeting, they're trying to preach to the vegan community, just as we're not out there trying to preach to the choir of people who are off the booze. I think for us, it's much more exciting to look at how we can change the stories that we tell, change the drinking culture, the culture around kind of beer, and just change create a new segment, a new kind of way of approaching socializing with a drink, and doing that with people like us who are still enjoying regular beers but looking for an alternative every now and again.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's really cool. I just got this vision of like the next Found Space party is going to be like Heaps Normal beer and like Fable and meat.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's cool. How do you, okay, so now I'm thinking, well, okay, there's a percentage of the population who alcohol and the association with alcohol is not a good one. They've worked really hard to try and stop drinking. I'm thinking, does a drink like a non-alcoholic drink that tastes exactly like beer, can that potentially be a trigger for these people, which they should otherwise try and avoid? But this is kind of like, I can already hear the stories like, oh, but hasn't got alcohol in it, or it tastes like it, but it's not the same thing. So I'm fine. Like, I feel like there could be a bit of a gray area there.
The alcohol content's not the problem. And I say I'm generalizing. Of course, there's always an exception, and we always sort of say that people should consult their doctor if they're kind of worried about their own personal circumstances and how it might be affected by that kind of trace amount of alcohol or our product in general. But now that we've got all of the kind of caveats out of the way.
Yes. No, it's important.
I think our view on it is that, it definitely can be triggering for some people. It tastes exactly like a beer. There's people that have said to us that they can't tell the difference. Like when we first brewed our trial batch, we gave some of the blank cans out to bartenders and brewers and mates and didn't tell them that it was non-alcoholic. And a lot of them thought that it was a mid-strength beer. So it definitely can be triggering. And so I think that what we tend to say is that it's just about kind of understanding your own limits and your own triggers. And if something that tastes exactly like beer is going to be triggering for you, then maybe kind of consider whether it's the right kind of thing to use Heaps Normal or maybe explore other options. Like I think there's some really kick-ass kind of non-alcoholic options out there, like Non, for example, that doesn't, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily taste like you would expect regular wine to taste like, but it's really delicious, like adult kind of flavors and like so in that sense, there's so many options like that are out there that aren't necessarily going to be triggering if you have that kind of issue with flavors of beer.
Yeah, it's really hard because dealing with something like that, there's a lot of psychological depth to it. And some people, and that could be alcohol. It could be, alcohol, coffee, shopping, gambling, whatever your thing is. It could be something. It could be buying classical music or something. Like whatever it might be. And there can often be a lot to unpack psychologically as to why someone will go for something like that or use it as a way to distract, to not accept the moment and that kind of thing. I can see how it could get a bit curly when something like this comes in. It's like not dealing with the problem, and I'm not talking about like someone with excessive kind of like alcoholism as an example, but just someone who is using it as an escape. And this is a great way to kind of get around that whilst not really dealing with the problem. So it's really interesting to explore. And to what you said, I think being really aware of where you're at, I think is really, really important. And I talk from personal experience, man. Like I went through this journey of fasting and eating so cleanly and so strict. Like I was eating only fruits during the day and then like soft leafy greens with like lettuce, tomato, avo for dinner, some nuts, right? I did that for like a year and a half, did another fast, and now I'm way less strict with it. But I really got to tune in to what the mind can do when it's trying to come up with a reason as to eat something that at the time I didn't want to. And the mind's pretty fucking tricky, man. And for me, I was choosing at the time not to eat cooked food, but that could be replaced with alcohol, or it can be replaced with coffee. And something like this would fit into that space. It would be easier to justify whilst not dealing with the reasons as to why I don't want to be eating it and where those triggers are coming from. So, yeah.
Yeah, right. So it sounds like that might have been an example of where, something good can become a negative. Like, was that the case for you when it was, when it came to not eating cooked food?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the truthful answer to that is I don't know. Like, if I'm really honest with myself, because I'm one who goes to extremes sometimes, but also when we go to extremes, we learn our limits. And I went to the extreme, man. Like, after my second fast, I was 47 kilos. I wasn't eating any fats, fruits only. Like, you can't eat any cleaner than any more simple, and that's how I was eating. And through that, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about the mind. I learned a lot about the body. And so I wouldn't change it. And I actually loved that period in my life. Coming out of that, I learned, though, that there were times, and it wasn't all the time, when I was beating myself up had I, eaten too much avocado or something for dinner. That is like, that's not healthy, and so going through that experience, I now know that, and know that the mind can kind of go there. So there's definitely, you can definitely go to extremes, and trying to be healthy, you can actually end up being not healthy in other ways. Most definitely can talk
for sure.
Yeah.
What did you? I'm curious. What you learned about yourself in kind of going to that extreme? Because I think it's a really interesting idea. I think of that maybe a lot of us don't get to experience these days because there's so many safeguards in place. You don't get to kind of test yourself a lot of the time. But what did you learn about yourself by getting to that kind of extreme level?
Yeah, I learned a lot, in that state. So like I said, eating so light and being quite skinny, not very strong, the sense of like oneness with the world, I know this sounds a bit out there, but is really strong. And the sense of connection you have with others is really beautiful, and it feels deeper than anything. And like the connection with source, again, sound a bit woo-woo, but it's really strong. Those virtues of compassion for yourself and for others, and acceptance, and like true and deep love for one another and for yourself, like those virtues seem to really rise to the surface when you're in that state. And also, like, your cognitive ability is really, like, you are sharp. Like you can sense things that otherwise are kind of dulled down. Matthew McConaughey talked about that when he was prepping for the Machinist. He had to drop weight down to like this silly level, and he was saying like his cognitive ability was really sharp. And it's true, at that level the brain is really switched on. But then there's the other side of it, like I struggled to do squats, because I had no muscle left. And so the physical body, especially right after a fast, really, really kind of suffered. And I just learned like that the chemistry in the brain really has an effect on your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions. Like having balance in that is really important. And the foods that you put in will really shape the way that you perceive the world
amazing.
Yeah. So,
and so how do you use that now? Because it sounds like you kind of arrived there by accident in a way into that state. Like, obviously you were taking some deliberate steps, but you got to that kind of extreme state, maybe unexpectedly. So then, like, how do you use like that as a tool now, like to kind of sharpen the mind? Like, how to get the benefits of what you experienced?
It's a great question.
Without the downsides.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most profound thing that I learned through that experience was, we're both in positions of leadership running businesses. And for me, if I could simplify that down to one thing, it's leading from a place of love is the most powerful thing that I learned in that. Leading from a place of love, not fear. You can create anything in this world, and that's probably my biggest takeaway. Obviously, a deeper understanding about myself and how I think and how I tick. And hey, I'm only fucking 29, man, so to learn. But when you go to that place, you really see what's in there inside, But yeah, I would say leading from a place of love, especially in business. And it was at a time when, and even now, I feel like I have a responsibility. We have 25 full-time staff around Australia and New Zealand now. I have a responsibility to be clear, to be level-headed, to be sharp, and through doing that, and even the way that I'm living now, I feel like I can be fully there for our team and therefore our customers around Australia, around New Zealand, to make sure that they're getting incredible product, incredible value, and the essence of what we do at Found Space really flows through everything we do. I feel like it's important for me to be in that place to be able to make those kind of right decisions around where we go as a business and make sure everyone's looked after and the customers are looked after. We treat them like family, just as we do our internal team, because people who are looking to improve their health and doing that with us, it's a really vulnerable place. And so for me, I feel like it's important to be really clear and level-headed when running a business like we do,
Yeah, 100%. Thanks. I've already fulfilled my intention now. I've just learned something that I think I can take forward.
Yeah, nice, man. But hey, this is supposed to be your interview, right? So, but no, it's a really cool space. So yeah, there was one last question I did want to make sure that I asked you. So, where do you see this kind of sector going? Where do you see non-alcoholic beer going? Where's Heaps Normal focusing their efforts at the moment? But then also where do you see the whole space growing over the next few years around the world?
Yeah, I think it's really exciting. I think that non-alcoholic beer is going to be a big part of the global beer market into the future. Certainly not going anywhere. And at the moment, particularly in Australia, where we're still very much on the ground floor when it comes to, I think, the consumer appetite that we're going to see for non-alcoholic beer and other non-alcoholic options. And, I think there's a few things that point to that. Some of the much bigger players that have a lot more data behind them than we do as a small business. Big companies like Heineken are seeing that by 2025, I think it's roughly 23% of their total beer volume sold in Australia will be non-alcoholic from within their non-alcoholic portfolio. So that's a huge call, I think, from an alcohol company, or no less, who aren't really incentivized to be sort of bullish when it comes to the non-alcoholic category. And I think more anecdotally, it's really exciting for us to see, how we personally saw this product benefiting our own lives, seeing that really take hold in not only our community, but in the beer community, beer category, amongst beer consumers more generally, where we're hearing stories and seeing, people, just using this product to go, 1-for-1 to space out their drinks and have a VB or a Grifter or a Four Pines, and then, or a Stomping Ground if you're in the southern states, and then then have like a Heaps Normal in between, and go 1-for-1. We're seeing people go to the bottle shop and grab a 6-pack of their favorite craft beer or their favorite beers, and then a 4-pack of Heaps Normal as well, and just using that to kind of have to get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, that's really interesting, man. I mean, you guys are quite literally influencing drinking culture of one of the, I would imagine, the most sturdy drinking cultures in the world, being Australian drinking culture. And you guys are actually having an influence over the way that people plan out their nights based on the beer that you guys sell.
Oh, that's amazing. Like that's so exciting to hear if that's the case. And, we're seeing early signs of, like I said, anecdotally, like that, people are starting to make those kinds of decisions. But, I think we're just stoked to be part of this. I think this movement that is it sounds a bit of a wank maybe, but we genuinely see it as a movement, and it was something that people a lot smarter than us who have seen similar things in other categories, like in the kind of music sector, for example. They've seen movements come and go through those areas of culture, and it's been those people, like one of our investors, Jaden Comerford, who founded Universal Music Group. You was one of the first people, I think, that said to us, like, this is a movement. You guys are part of this movement that's happening, and we're really excited to be a part of that. And I think there's some really, really interesting options popping up out there, and people are starting to think differently about it and contribute in their own way, I think, to that movement as well, that changing drinking culture.
It totally is a movement, man. Yeah. And to me, it's exciting, because I don't know, I just see what you guys are doing, and I see as a global community, a transition to more renewable energy and up in the environment and electric cars and these kind of things. And it just feels good. I could try to intellectualize it, but it just feels like a positive step. And I think it's really cool, and it is a movement, and the fact that big companies like Heineken and the likes are talking about it and are bullish about it, I think is really, really cool. And I'm excited to watch this space and see how it kind of unfolds. Now, I might put my foot in it here, but what drinks are you guys kind of working on at the moment? Are you still sticking with beer? Are you getting out of that and trying some other things? I'm curious.
We're sticking with beer for now. I think there's so much more that we can do just in beer, and we don't want to try and be too many things. I think I was going to say, we're looking forward to releasing more beers in the next year, and I think just probably looping back around to your kind of early point around having some fun. That's sort of really, really important to us, and we don't want to take ourselves too seriously, and I think that's really important when you're talking about a movement. Like, so often when you start talking in that sort of language, people think it's this big serious thing, and for us it's so important first and foremost to be a fun brand, like a fun beer brand. Like the non-alcoholic thing is secondary. It's like a feature of the product. And we have a lot of fun every day, just working on the business, and hopefully that comes through in some of the films that we've put out there, like the Dutch Courage film that we released recently, and just some of the ways that we kind of connect with our community. But I think just having fun with it, not taking ourselves too seriously, and even down to the name, that was really where that was born as well. When we launched, there was nothing normal about a non-alcoholic beer, and so rather than sort of come out with another product called Zero Beer, we just wanted to have some fun and lean into the fact that some people thought that non-alcoholic beer was a bit weird, and we thought the stuff that's weird is what makes us all interesting, and so let's just lean into it. Let's call it Heaps Normal. Let's normalize mindful drinking, but let's normalize other shit that we care about too. Like let's normalize, being a responsible business when it comes to the planet. Let's normalize paying artists properly. Let's normalize equality in our workplace and in our industry, and try and shift the gender balance there. And just all of that stuff that we don't necessarily talk about, publicly all the time or put it up on our socials, but it's just, it's stuff that's in our minds and that we're thinking about, and that has been part of the whole kind of, inspiration behind starting Heaps Normal and the kind of brand that we want it to be.
Yeah, that's cool, man. What's it like to work at Heaps Normal? You guys must.
I hope it's good. We've worked at some great places and great organizations, and we've worked at some ones where we didn't have such a great time, and Benny, Pete and I have all genuinely sat around putting a lot of time and energy and discussion into trying to work out what it is that makes a fun place to work. So I hope that at least in some sense we've tried to kind of create a culture that is really flexible, allows you to kind of be whoever you are, and also I think to acknowledge that people, you can't just resource, like you can't just be productive 100% of the time. You need to create space for life, and for different lifestyles, like of people in our team, different individuals as well around, working in different ways and being productive in different ways. So we've, tangible examples around like our hybrid workplace, so remote first work environment, and an extra paid week of leave every year, and mental health services and sort of professional psychology services that we sort of pay for our team. But then also like the kicker at the end is this sort of little rule of thumb that we have for ourselves with anything that we're working on, where if we're not having fun doing it, if we're not having fun making it, then we really need to question why we're doing it at all, or why we're doing it that way. Because I think if we're having fun, then the things that we're putting out there, other people are going to enjoy too.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. It is about fun, man. Like I often joke to Kristen. I say we'll be watching TV and a beer ad will come on. I often say to her, I'm like, if I'm ever not found space, the CEO, if I'm ever, for whatever reason, not in this business anymore, I want to be a beer marketer, because I swear they're having the best fucking time when they are making those ads, man.
Definitely. I think beer ads are traditionally in the history of advertising, they have to be the most fun ads ever made. There's some classic Australian examples. And I think if you're ever looking for a job, mate, please, we'd be honoured to have you come and be a beer, fulfill your kind of maybe childhood dream of being a beer marketer.
You're too kind. Yeah, man. It looks like a good time. That's so cool. That's so cool. So if people want to find out more about Heaps Normal, or if people want to find out a bit more about yourself, where can they do that?
We're working on some fun new places on the heapsnormal.com website for people to kind of learn a little bit more about the stuff that we're interested in and people in our community. If people want to learn more about me, I don't know if that's really a thing, shoot me an email, give me a call. My number and my details are pretty widely available.
We'll find you pretty easy, yeah.
But we always love hearing people's stories and how the different ways that Heaps Normal or non-alcoholic beer is sort of is playing a part in their own individual lifestyle. So we get a lot of those stories from people in our community, and it never gets old. It's super exciting to connect with people on that level. So yeah, if you want to reach out, we're always keen to hear from you.
Beautiful. Well, Andy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Alex. Really appreciate it.